Hey, welcome to the show. I am so excited for this episode. We have an amazing guest on, Miss Rebekah. She has volunteered to get some free coaching on the podcast for your value and pleasure. And I hope that you get so much out of our conversation today. Thanks again, Rebekah, for being so brave to come on the podcast for some free coaching. You are amazing.
Welcome to the Business of Inner Peace. I'm your host, Erin Jean, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's pretend we're sitting in my living room enjoying a cup of coffee or tea and getting to know each other just a little better. That's what I love. I love getting to hear your story. I love feeling connected by the spirit of understanding that our stories bring. Today, I'm sharing some of my story, but I hope someday soon you'll be telling me yours. Listen, I know that you're feeling overwhelmed with life and nothing is exactly how you'd like it to be. Your marriage is not what you hoped for, motherhood is harder than you imagined, and you've lost yourself somewhere in the mix of responsibilities. Well, if you're ready to bring some more peace and joy into your life, reconnect with God who made you, and start living a life you love, then grab your cup of coffee or tea and let's dive into today's show.
What's on your heart and mind today?
I think I'm just really acknowledging how my childhood has carried on very much into my relationships, consciously and subconsciously, because you can be conscious of patterns and behaviors that stem from your childhood, but then you can also be doing it without realizing it as well. So it's always such like a little battle where it's always funny. It's like when you get into relationships, you always, like when you're single, you think you work through all these things, and then you get into your relationship and then it starts triggering all these things. You're like, like I thought I dealt with that already. I thought, like I found peace with that, but clearly not, because this is being triggered right now. I think it stems a lot from like the way, like my childhood, the way I grew up was in a very, how do you say, like always walking on eggshells. Like my stepfather, who is my brother's real father, I have a separate father. So my mom had me at 20 and then left him when I was very, very young, and then met my brother's father when I was very young as well. And then I had 2 children with him. So I grew up thinking he was my dad till I was 6, and my mom was like, "Hey, that's not your dad." Found out I was an Italian. That's fine, but he was just a very narcissist, very narcissist, broken man. And my mom was just at a very, very vulnerable space at that time in her life, I guess, and just needed someone to like feel that support. Having a new child at 20 years old, like, you're kind of a bit lost. And I think that we just grew up with a father who was just very, very, very manipulative, very angry, very controlling, and like lack of emotion, lack of careness. As we all know, narcissists, they don't understand really what they're doing. They're very much in their own little world, trying to make sure everything is, at the right place for them, no matter how much it hurts people. So I watched like my mom grow to this relationship where he like very much manipulated her, brainwashed her. And it would be to the point where it was like, as a young kid, when I'd express myself, often it was, you're victimizing, you're guilt tripping, you're victimizing, you're guilt tripping. And it was all the time, to the point where at 11 years old in my diary, I wrote, like, my parents will let me feel what I feel. So at a very young age, my feelings and my thoughts were very suppressed. Like, it was always almost like everything I felt was not okay. Mm-hmm. And I know my mom did her best. Like, at that point in her life, she was in survival mode. So she was just like doing what she could to try to keep everything together. So at a very young age, I grew up around violence, verbal, physical, mental, if you will, because there's different ways where you can be violent. And that goes into like seeing my first relationship at 17. It was, like the high school boy that all the girls want, the troublemaker who gets into the fights, blue eyes, beautiful boy. And then all of a sudden he has interest in me. And I was like braces, a bit chubbier, like totally not like. And I remember that moment, I thought to myself, like, I don't actually have feelings for him, but I'm being seen and I'm being wanted and I'm being needed. He was a very troubled boy from a troubled past. So it was like he fed that needs to be seen, but in such a wrong way. But I like grasped onto it. So I met him at 17, at 2017, in January, we started dating. And then 4 months later, 3 months later, I turned 18. And then 1 month after, I ran away, if you will. I like left by my window, didn't tell my mom, and started like kind of living in the streets with him. Like it was chaotic. So I came on very like I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was known as the child or the kid at school that had the very strict parents. So, but I have a very wild soul, like wild child soul. Like I was just so, how do you explain it? Not having my dad in my life. I didn't understand that part of me because that's who he is. He traveled his whole 20s all over the world, and like he's still that like free spirit. So I think I was just looking to figure out who I was. And then I got into this relationship that lasted 5 years, 5 years too long. But this person was in and out of jail, addicted to drugs, verbally abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive, to the point where there's nights I was sitting up crying because I didn't know. I felt like I was stuck with him for the rest of my life. Like he wouldn't let me leave this relationship. And seeing everything I went to is everything I grew up. The chaos that I grew up in is what he brought to me. So I found that comfort in that chaos.
Yeah.
And I found this like way to fill my need of being wanted. So I was like supporting him financially, supporting his mom financially, his brother at one point. They were stealing for me. It was bad. Like I was just like, here, take, empty me, because this is actually giving me something that I, am looking for, even though it's not healthy. And then when I was 22, I just realized like I need to do something drastic to end this and to like remove myself. So I cut the phone line that I was paying for from him. At this point, he was like totally addicted to drugs, so didn't even know where he was at that point. Moved downtown Montreal by myself and like restarted my life. And I was just like, it was a big drastic change, and it really did affect me mentally. Like I dated a lot for that 3 years after that, but I never made anything like serious. I was so terrified of like losing myself again to someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like my first like long-term relationship was horrible, like.
Yeah. And so what you've done there though, let's just break this first relationship apart, because I think you've kind of done it, but it's helpful to just, let's say it one more time and really get eyes on it, because your conscious mind sort of told you like, this is wonderful. Somebody loves me or is wanting me, desiring me, which feels good, right? And it was a bit exciting because it was outside of your family situation, in that it was kind of like rule breaking if you had this strict family. But what was really happening was that your subconscious recognized that it could complete this pattern that you were already living in with him, right? You can see that how even though on the surface it looked like something new and different than what you were living, it was actually the same exact thing, which is so important to recognize, because that is what your subconscious is made to do. It's just made to keep you alive, not happy, not joyful, not feeling like everything's comfortable. I use the word safe a lot. And that's more meaning like she's going to survive. Rebekah will survive this situation. It won't feel good for you, but your subconscious mind doesn't have an opinion on that. It doesn't care about if you're joyful or feeling comfortable or any of that. It's just focused on keeping you alive. And so here's where we just kind of remove all guilt and we say, thank you. Like, good job. Because your subconscious did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept you alive, right? And I know it might feel a little bit twisted or hard to be like, I don't want to say thank you for that, right? That sucked. It was a horrible time of my life. yes, it was, but just looking at your subconscious mind, right? It did what it was designed to do. And so I just want you to know that, like, it doesn't mean anything about you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't suck, you didn't mess up, you didn't make terrible choices. Like you really were in an autopilot, allowing your mind to keep you safe and alive. And it
Mhm.
and it worked, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a piece of why you're doing this work is because you are ready. I can hear it. You're ready to rewire. You're like,
Yeah.
we don't need this program anymore. This program actually is not serving me. Yeah.
It's very true, yeah. I feel like when I read Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is about rewiring, I think that was after my second relationship or during my second relationship even. It was during, yeah. Because I think I had realized from my first one at a young age, which I was really happy that and I think the moment that I really like everything, I realized it, and even though I still stayed a bit after that, was the first time my stepdad ever hit my mom. They were arguing over my brother, and he got violent with her, and then I ran in between them, and he, like, I'll never forget those words. I don't know why he said, "This is all your fault." At like 15, 16, I think it was 15 or 16, very confused. I'm like, how? You guys are arguing about my brother, but okay, sure. And then there was one time where my first ex-boyfriend, got violent with me. And when the police came to get him, he looked at him and he said, "This is all your fault." And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I'm literally in the same pattern, like the same, not the same, but same, but different, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was a big wake up call that it's so hard to leave a toxic relationship. Like, you can't just, like, yes, you can get up and do it from one day to the other, but you're still going to be grieving and, like, in shock, which is what happened. But it was just funny because my second relationship, I went with someone who was younger. And I think this is how all the years I lost, like, being survival mode, taking care of someone for 5 years from the age of 17 to 22, which is like crucial time in your life too, right?
Yeah.
I felt like I had lost so much. So then I dated younger, and I was like, he was kind of keeping me, like, giving me what I had lost. But he was like, he's on a spectrum. So, like, he did not understand what emotions were. And that was really hard for me because coming from some, in the past where I needed to be understood, I needed to be seen. And that was like what I was craving. That was a different challenge. But then I was comparing it with always because he's young, always because he's younger than me. Like, he was 5 or 6 years younger. So it was a big gap still, old soul, but still you can't ask a 20-year-old to act like a 26-year-old, like it was very, we're still friends to this day. So I think that relationship, it was hard because in it, I felt completely invisible, but now that it's like past, I understood that it was just the wrong person and we just kind of like needed each other at that moment in our lives kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was fine. And then my third relationship was another chaotic relationship. I seem to love chaos. But I also was at a very, very vulnerable state when I had met him. My best friend had just passed away from an overdose. So I was just like, I guess, again, looking for comfort. And I was actually leaving to move to Australia. So I had left Montreal at the time to go live in Canmore. Met this guy. It was like instant connection. I was completely in love. And then I was leaving to Australia. And then he decided, I left in December, and then in March he like sold all his stuff, packed his stuff, and came. So you're thinking like total love story, like this is amazing. I totally dated a con artist, someone who portrayed as someone that was completely the opposite and had this obsessive compulsive behavior with all of his exes, and still has that issue today, unfortunately. But so little did I know he was still messaging his exes, sending like photos, and this is the entire time while he's like sold everything to come join me in Australia. So I'm thinking like, wow, this guy really likes me, like he's so that was another pattern of like seeing my stepdad who was completely in love with my mom, like obsessively, but then was like cheating on her and like doing all these things to her. So I saw that someone can love you with everything they have, but they can also hurt you. And that goes together. So again, with the patterns I've had, I've always been with people who showed me so much love and like so much passion, but then were able to hurt me so much. So that ended up being horrible. Like there was one I ended up in the hospital with the black eye, and that was the only time it ever happened. But it was like there was so much emotion and so much frustration. It was during COVID times. I found out he cheated on me, and I stayed and I stayed and I studied him. It was like, it's like I have these obsessions of trying to understand bringing patterns of people, and understanding that it's like I get that what they do is never towards me, because no one intentionally or promote for the most part wants to hurt someone. And they're all doing it from their own pain. So it was like I accepted so much understanding this. So then my boundaries are completely out of whack, because it was like I don't want to judge someone from their past because I've been there and I know how I am. So maybe I can just help them. So I constantly have this like savior mode in me. But then I don't do that to myself, for myself, if you will. At that point, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like another, I don't know how to explain it. It's like, I guess seeing my mom devote so much to my stepdad and seeing how much he loved her, but he hurt her and she just accepted it. Was like, to me, that's what love is, right? And I'm realizing that it's not what it is. Like, giving her 100% to someone is not what love is. You know, it's sometimes what we think, if I do this for this person, if I help this person, if I'm pretty enough, if I do this enough, so then I get into these modes where I'm a people pleaser, I want to be heard. And I've noticed a lot of my reactions is like my nervous system gets activated so easily. Like it's crazy. And I'll spiral out. And I know that that's what's happening. But in that moment, I'm so afraid of being hurt. I'm so afraid of rejection. I'm so afraid of all these things happening that have happened to me in the past, that I like go into panic mode. And then it's like I feel like, I don't know how to explain it. Like my meter level of lava will go from like here to like here within a second. And then when it's here, I can't bring it down. And I know that I'm at that point, and I know that it's not a healthy reaction, but I don't know how to like get myself back down. Yeah. And I just I've kept getting into relationships that triggered that. Like I think I could say I've been, like it's always the pattern I go to. And at first I was like, oh, it's because of them. Like they're pushing those buttons, and oh, it's because I'm in this type of relationship. And then I'm realizing, no, it's because I'm literally going back to my inner child's fear and letting her take over and reacting that way. And I don't know how to make her feel like reassured. You know, I don't know how to like bring her back to calm mode. And I think that's been my biggest issue for me in my relationships, is that, because like now I'm in a healthy relationship. Well, obviously it's not perfect, but when I started reacting that way, my boyfriend's like, whoa, like calm down, like don't react. And at first I used to get so upset because I was like, don't tell me to calm down. And I'm realizing, no, he's right. Like, why am I shouting when we're talking, you know? And I guess it's just like, now that I'm in a healthy relationship, it's been such a wake up call to how much my last relationships were feeding into my bad habits and my like wiring, if you will. So I was fighting so hard to fire while feeding it with the wrong like source, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to have you back up just a second and think about relationship 2, the guy that you described as being on the spectrum.
yeah.
Can you recognize in that relationship your patterning?
I think it was, I needed to feel needed again. So I was like, oh, like he has difficulty in this, so then I can help him, and then maybe he'll like love me because I'm helping him in that, if that makes sense. It's like the savior once again, you know?
Yeah.
I saw something broken, I'm broken, so I want to like, yeah.
I also want to highlight for you that you told me in your childhood that you weren't allowed to like feel feelings and express feelings, and that there was a disconnect there for your feelings being expressed. And you told me with this guy that he basically was kind of emotionally inept. And it sounds like that was a match for the pattern, right? Can you see how your feelings being expressed weren't heard and understood?
Yeah.
So that's another place where your subconscious mind successfully found the pattern and was able to keep that part, that which was really a wound, right? Going and alive and well. And then I think it's pretty obvious to see, you know, in the third relationship that you nailed it, like chaos, right? Chaos has been wired in your whole system as safety. Right. So if you're in chaos, it means, okay, good, we're going to survive. Like as long as life is chaotic, then we're going to survive. And you're like such a beautiful example of how people just do this in life on repeat, and they keep having really horrible relationships over and over. And it doesn't always have to be come up in relationship. That's where it's really coming up for you at this moment, right? But it could come up in like addictions, right? Making unhealthy choices around food or money or things like that. It might be a weight struggle. It might be a poverty struggle. Like if they had a family that didn't have any money, they can just never hold down a job, right? They're always letting go. So it's so important for people to hear and understand and see like, oh, here's a really great live example of how when we just don't ever pay attention to this part of us, it's gonna keep going forever. Right? But the good news is you can rewire it and you can create a new pattern. And one of the most crucial steps is exactly what you're talking about. You need to start learning how to regulate the nervous system, right? So as soon as you are triggered, right, you've got to start playing with all kinds of tools to how do we get the nervous system back to regulation. So once you're triggered, it's your primal brain, right, that is activated. And if your primal brain is running the show, which is the fight, flight, or freeze, you can't access your frontal cortex, right? So no analytics, logic, critical decision making, that can't happen. When you're back here, you can only be told what to do, which is why a relationship with a narcissist works so well, because they trigger you into your primal brain and you're in fight, flight, or freeze. And then they start telling you what to do. And of course, you will obey because you can't even think with your logical mind. Right. And so, again, it's like a good understanding of like, it's not your fault. This is just kind of how your brain was wired. And a narcissist doesn't like know this, conceptually, but there's a part of them that knows it because they've seen how it works to their benefit, right? Yeah. So they know it enough to like get a person into a state of fear in one way or another so that they can have control, even though they might not realize what's happening in that person's brain. So for
I experienced it last year.
Yeah.
I had like a short, I guess like a 1 year or something relationship with someone. It was very intense, really quick. And he was a complete narcissist, which is, it's crazy to me because like I grew up with that. I've been with that. I did a whole like, I remember in community college, we had like a free subject for an essay and presentation. And I chose narcissism because I think I was like 21 at the time. And I just wanted to understand how I grew up. And my teacher was like, what, narcissism? Like that was, it was just coming out. Not many people knew what that was at this point. Like it was still kind of like a hidden. And so it's like, I've read books about it. Like I've literally did all this research and I still ended up with a narcissist and completely like how involved in it. And I lost myself. I was doubting myself. I went to complete depression. Like I'll be completely honest, like it got me pretty like in the darkest moments of my entire life, to the point where my mom flew out from Montreal to Vancouver, where I am now, because she was worried for me. And it took me, after we ended things, it took me 2 weeks to actually realize all this. And I bounced back so quickly because I think I was so upset at myself for letting myself get there again. And he fooled my mom until she flew down and spent the week with us. And then she saw what I had been dealing with. And she ended up losing it with us here. Like it was just, and when I saw how he made her react was literally how he would push my buttons and I would lose it. And then he made me feel like I was the crazy one and I was this. And so that was very eye-opening. And I was just like, how is it now I'm 34, but at 33, after living everything I've lived, how am I back here once again? Like, and I'm like, reading books and like doing studies and like listening to like, I follow pages on Instagram about narcissism. Like, it's just like, it's insane how you can have like, all the information there with you. But if it's just at that vulnerable time that they find you, where they just kind of like rail you in, that's the most dangerous part, because you're hooked, right? Once you're hooked, it's like you can't get the hook out unless you really like try your hardest to swim away. And even then, like they'll find every way to hook you in so many different ways and to make you doubt yourself and make you feel like, it's just
Yeah.
it's scary. Yeah, because you go in feeling like the most beautiful person in the world and they love you so much. And then within 3-4 months, all of a sudden you're like walking on eggshells wondering like, am I good enough? Like it's insane. Like how easily it can happen. And that's why when people judge, like, how come we didn't leave him before? And I'm like, I know it's easy for you to say that from the outside, but when you're in the inside, you literally have to like punch down a million, like 25 walls, brick walls to get to that end. And sometimes you're just so tired that you just like accept it, and I
Yeah.
think yeah, I'm happy that I didn't make that last more than it did. It's already an improvement for my past relationships, if you will, like kind of knowing, okay, no, this is not working. I'm not going to waste another 2-3 years of my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's
Well, what I really want to invite you into is just a relationship with you, right? It's time to just take that deep dive and just have a relationship with you. I feel like you're not allowing yourself that. And it could feel scary. It's like you've got a lot of the head knowledge around how all of it's working and everything, but maybe the actual doing, like if you will, the doing of that is a threat to your whole system, right? Your whole system is like, we might die. We might die if she does that because we have no evidence. There's no program we can reference that shows us we will survive trying to change the pattern. Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
yeah.
So an easy place to start is to work on that trigger point. So when you are in fight, flight, or freeze, let's talk about that, what that feels like for you physically in your body, so we can bring some more awareness to your whole system of like, this is how we know that it's happening. Like, is there a physical reaction?
Yeah. When it's like very deep, I tend to like my whole body will start vibrating, like shaking, and I'll be sweating.
Okay.
And this happens in those moments, and this will happen if I'm like, it happens a lot. Like if I go to therapy and I talk about a moment that was very like traumatic for me,
Mm-hmm.
my body will start vibrating and I'll start sweating. And sometimes the sweating is pretty intense. Like I literally have to like
Yeah.
that's happened to me since a young age because I remember my mom brought me to see someone when I was like, I think I was like 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to her and that was happening. And that moment is like so like imprinted in my mind for some reason because I didn't understand what was happening to me, why I was reacting this way. And like it's happening a little bit right now. Just I don't know, just I guess thinking about it, it's like putting that your brain's like, oh, is she in that mode? But
Yeah.
so I
Okay.
definitely a lot of physical.
Good. So let's do a little bit of some calming exercise around it right now. We're going to start with hands over heart. Okay. Take a big breath in, release. And then I want you to just follow me. We're going to do tapping, which really helps. And you don't have to know exactly what we're doing, but you just have to follow me. So start by tapping on the side of your hand, the karate chop point. Even though I feel this way, I want you to say that after me.
Even though I feel this,
I am safe and I completely love and accept myself.
I am safe and I completely love and accept myself.
Even when I'm feeling vibrating and hot and sweaty,
Even when I'm feeling vibrating, hot, and sweaty,
I completely love and accept myself.
I completely love and accept myself.
All right, bring it up here to your eyebrow. I get so overwhelmed.
I get so overwhelmed.
All of these emotions and memories
All of these emotions and memories
flood my system,
flood my system.
come to your side of eye. I don't like how I feel.
I don't like how I feel.
Under eye, I feel out of control.
I feel out of control.
Under nose, I feel like I'm not sure what's going to happen next.
I feel like I'm not sure what's going to happen next.
Under mouth, I feel like I need to keep myself safe.
I feel like I need to keep myself safe.
Collarbone. And so I'm trying to regulate my body.
So I'm trying to regulate my body.
Underarms. And I don't like feeling out of control.
And I don't like feeling out of control.
Top of head. But maybe, just maybe, I can regain control.
I can regain control.
Maybe, just maybe,
Maybe, just maybe,
I am safe.
I am safe.
Side of eye, and I can allow my body to calm down.
I can allow my body to calm down.
I can remember I'm 34 years old.
I can remember I'm 34 years old.
I'm in Vancouver.
I'm in Vancouver.
I am not a little girl.
I'm not a little girl.
I get to say what happens to me today.
I get to say what happens to me today.
It's my rules,
It's my rules,
not mom and dad's.
not mom and dad's.
And I'm going to be okay. And I am deeply loved. Good. And just put your palms on top of your hands, open and up. And we're going to take a big breath in and out. How are you feeling?
More calm, yeah.
Yeah.
Less sweaty.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
So, the big no-nos when you notice your body going into those feelings, you don't want to scroll on a phone. Okay. Don't pick up your phone and start looking at anything. You don't want to pick up the phone and call anybody and start reliving whatever situation, right?
Mhm.
Like that could be a tendency. Call mom, tell her what a jerk so-and-so just was, and then you're staying in it, right? We want to get your system out of it as quick as possible. So quick ways to get out of it. What we just did, tapping will help. Any kind of breath work, right? If you're just focusing on counting and holding and then releasing for the same number, just something very simple like that. Going outside, like the faster you can get in nature, that usually resets us very quick, especially if you could take your shoes off and like ground anywhere, right? That is really good. And then play with, like, maybe for your system, a bubble bath is lovely. Maybe you want like a cup of tea and you can listen to like classical music, something that's like super relaxing, not like pop music or rock music or anything like that. Something that's going to be soothing. Even if you go onto YouTube and find the like healing, I think it's 9.4 gigahertz, like just play one of those frequencies, right?
Yeah.
That can be, so those are all tools for you to start to play with on the regulation side. And you might want to think about sharing this with, the person you're dating right now, because if he's noticing, whoa, like he sees that you're getting triggered, right? He could actually be somebody that would help you and just reflect to you like, oh, it looks like maybe you got triggered, right? Your system needs minimum of 20 minutes. So like, okay, I'm taking a minimum of a 20-minute break from whatever we were just talking about. It doesn't matter if you feel upset or not, you got triggered. It doesn't, like, taking a break, it doesn't make anybody bad,
No.
right?
No, not at all.
And you can just agree to like, oh, we can talk about this in 20 minutes, or we can talk about it later tonight, or we can talk about it tomorrow. You could just make a plan of when you'll pick up the conversation. But either you recognize that you need a break or he recognizes that you need a break. And then you start to play with those tools that I just gave you to see which one actually helps calm you the fastest, right?
Yeah.
And brings you back. And then as soon as you're calm, now you're back to your critical mind where you're making good logical decisions. And now that's the person we want to have a conversation with, right?
Yeah. there's definitely like little tricks that I've tried, but sometimes it's like when you're in the moment, it's so hard to like get yourself to doing it. Like I know there's one that I like to do when I'm not too much nasty. It's like kind of writing out like what it is that I'm feeling and what I'm feeling it for, and like what's the truth of it, and what am I like, how do you say, like what am I taking, creating in my own mind that's not true. So it's like finding the evidence of why I'm feeling this way kind of helps me like put in better perspective. So it's like, am I actually upset at this person for doing that? Or did that just trigger something that I don't like and I reacted as if, and that's kind of helped me regulate, like, okay, I think I'm reacting right now because something was triggered, or like, because everything you're feeling is always valid, but I feel like it's like checking in to know if it's really you're reacting to what happened, or if you're reacting because it's triggered something in you in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's getting to that can be hard sometimes. I feel like I've definitely made like a lot of efforts and changes in the last like 4 or 5 months, because what is funny about my partner now is I'm seeing a lot of myself in him, so it's been really eye-opening. So like we both kind of grew up in that sense of like not feeling seen, so our communication is fine. We express what we feel, no problem. It's the listening aspect that we're having a hard time with. So seeing him react that way is shining the light on how I react with other people. So the moment someone expresses themselves about like a situation that's uncomfortable, it's like I'm so afraid of rejection or of like disappointing or feeling like I failed, that I get defensive without even realizing it, because I just want to protect myself. So I'm not actually listening. I'm like half listening while already preparing what I want to like, get back at the person. And he does that to me, and it really frustrates me. And I was like, oh my goodness, I do that to people as well. And I've noticed it. So we kept saying like we have to find a better way of communicating. And I was like, you know what? It's not the communication, it's the listening. And that's what I'm observing by seeing you react this way. Is like, it's not always about communication. It's actually about giving that safe space for someone to express himself and feel heard. You literally alter the outcome. Like if someone says to me like, okay, so like I'll express everything I'm feeling about this, that. And then if they go right into what they're feeling, and right away I'm feeling rejected, because it's like, okay, I just took the time to express all this to you. You didn't acknowledge it. You went straight to yourself. And I feel like sometimes we miss that gap of being like, okay, so what I'm feeling is like, what I'm hearing is you're feeling this because of that. So right away it's like, oh, you actually listened to me and heard me, you're acknowledging what I'm saying, and you're trying to understand if it's correct. So that I know will really state down right away, because like that trigger of not being heard or listened to doesn't get activated. That part shift, I noticed that's when I go from like here to here, because I'm like, you're not listening to me. And then that like he comes out, and that's where I'm like, oh. So I've been working on trying to be like, hey, I was speaking and I said this, can you please acknowledge what I said? And then like, so it's been a really interesting like growing moment for me in my life right now, because of having someone that's like same but different. And like we're growing together, and it's nice. We're both like acknowledging things about ourselves, and like, and it's not easy every day. There's some days where I'm just like, and other days I'm just so happy, because I'm like, this is what I've been looking for so long. So, but again, I live with the fear that my reactions will ruin this relationship. So this is what I'm like, give that trust in myself, and like you said, have the relationship with myself first, to like not let that be triggered, and not let that be part of my reactions anymore. So
what you're describing is actually a tool I use in my marriage program. It's called the rapport, and it's where you have a speaker role and a listener role, and everybody knows like the rules, and it helps with communication so much, because you kind of set it up at the beginning of the conversation that like, hey, I'm going to be the speaker and you're going to be the listener, right? And then when it's like, when I've said everything I want to say, we can switch. Right. And then you can be the speaker and I'll be the listener. But that's exactly the listener's job. It's actually harder to be the listener, because you have to repeat back and ask a lot of questions and make sure you got it right and make sure you heard everything. And it's kind of hard to do it like mid-conversation. Like you almost really have to set the intention at the front end of any conversation, especially if you know you're talking about something that's important to you. like to say, like I'll say with my husband, I want to talk about this, but I want to talk about it in the speaker listener way.
Yeah.
Like make sure we're following the rules. Like remember the rules of that? And that always goes a little better. So you're really noticing, right? That's like that was a fantastic insight. And so start trying to have conversations with that at the as the intention at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So you can do that better. Well, what I want to do with you today, I've heard you say it a few times, and I think it's like really relevant and ready to be seen, is there's a fear of rejection, right? And all of us have that. And what we call that is the fear of getting kicked out of the tribe. So just from our cultural, everything we've inherited from, all of mankind, time after time, right? Being kicked out of the tribe historically has been really dangerous, right? Because it meant that you are not going to survive because you needed the tribe to survive for food. You need the tribe for safety and protection, right? The tribe is always working together to create housing, to create food, and all of those things. So getting kicked out of the tribe to our systems means death, right?
Yeah.
Super, super scary. And as our society has evolved, getting kicked out of the tribe doesn't necessarily mean like literal death anymore, but it can feel like death to our insides because it feels so scary, this idea of being rejected, right? And you're kind of fighting it because it sounds to me a lot of your childhood. You did not feel accepted and loved and safe. And so, in a way, you were being rejected, right? And
I definitely feel love. There was love, but it was just, I guess, unhealthy love. Like,
yeah,
all those feelings came mostly towards my stepdad, because now understanding, like, maybe when I was younger, I held maybe a bit of resentment towards my mom without understanding what situation she was in. There was definitely a lot of love. I think it was just more like, yeah, like all of us, including my mom, we were never allowed to express ourselves if it wasn't okay with the way, that mindset of my stepdad was, kind of thing. So,
well,
I think
and
that's
also,
what it was. Is that I grew up with a lot of love. So I felt the intensity of like so much love and then so much hate and chaos from like two extremes. And I noticed that like that's where a relationship there was a lot of love, but then a lot of like chaos and pain and like, so yeah.
And kind of what you said earlier, what got wired in is that love equals all of this unsafe stuff, right? Like, because if you're not really loved, if you're not having all of this other stuff over here, which we know that that's not true, but that is like part of what's getting wired in to your system or has gotten wired into your system. So today, the part that I just want to go in and look at together is this fear of being rejected, which is really like that fear of being kicked out of the tribe. So if you're up for it, I'm just going to bring us through like a short subconscious process where we're going to do like a visual meditation and have you lay down if you can and just relax. The only thing you need to do is just to be able to hear me. And I'm going to ask you a few questions as we go through it. So it's literally just like I'm going to lead you into a place where your body's relaxed. And then we're going to kind of ask your subconscious mind some questions. And when you're in that relaxed state, it'll easily answer us. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Hey, friend, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there. I hope you got so much value out of this conversation. Listen, if you want to be brave, just like Rebekah, and get some free coaching and some amazing insight into your own subconscious programming, I would be honored to have you on the podcast. Just follow the links below and grab the application form, and I will be in touch with you. Hope you have an amazing day.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're feeling blessed by the content here, the number one way you can show me is by leaving me a written review of the show. I'd be forever grateful. Knowing that you're out there listening helps me know that I'm truly living out God's purpose in my life. The other thing you can do is take a screenshot of this episode, share it with a friend, or better yet, tag me on your Instagram stories. Remember, you are seen, known, and loved. May God richly bless you today. All my love, Erin Jean.